We avoid not advancing people, if that makes sense, out of fear of disrupting peace and harmony. However, in doing so, we put people in positions of leadership that create entire years of chaos and disharmony. And I have personally seen it. Masonic Improvement, and I'm joined with my co-host Dennis Yates. How are you doing, Dennis?
Beautifully. I'm enjoyed. I'm excited about the night in the discussion, and even more excited about the summit coming up.
Awesome.
We got a good line of speakers, and Justin, I'm sure you'll put a link underneath for this so that all of our folks can come see them. But and you go to Eventbrite. If the link doesn't work for whatever reason, go to Eventbrite, look up Corpus Christi on September 16th, and you will see our event there, and you can purchase your tickets there. The lineup
that's just around the corner. As of this recording, that's just around the corner. Yeah, go ahead and tell them who's going to be there.
The lineup is Right Worshipful Jim Rumsey, Texas Grand Junior Warden. We have Bradley Kohanke, who is an author as well as a past Grand Orator. We have, and he was also on the Education Committee, the Grand Lodge Education Committee. We have Chris Williams, who is the Venerable Master of the Scottish Rite and head of the Education Committee for the Scottish Rite, and was also on the Grand Lodge Education Committee and an author. We have Right Worshipful Lucas Minton, who is the Grand Senior Deacon for Arkansas, for the Grand Jurisdiction of Arkansas. We have Right Worshipful Steve Omegar, who is the Deputy Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of New Mexico. We have Robert Park, who is also on our Education Committee for the Scottish Rite and one of the premier esoteric minds for the state of Texas. Hands down, anybody that knows him knows it and aren't afraid to tell him because they know that he's smarter than they are. We have the keynote speaker, Kyle Walquist, who has been a member of various Grand Lodge committees throughout the years, but his most impactful leadership has been in the I just had a halt. I'm sorry, in the membership committee for the Grand Lodge of Texas, which is very important because they track all the data and look at the who, why, what, where, when, and all that of Grand Lodge. And last but not least, he has been our secret guest speaker, but he is now no longer a secret. And in fact, we plan on having him on the show before too long. And that is the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of New Mexico, Most Worshipful Thomas Shank. And he will be speaking at the festive board for the summit, which is it's not going to be a full-on 4-hour-long festive board. It's more like the type that you're going to get if you close out a meeting in England. It's more of that type of festive board, like the true sense of a festive board, just closing out the meeting with the meal and fellowship and toasts. Then we're headed off to the Lexington for the master's degree, that's one of my favorite things in the world.
So not to beat a dead horse too much, but I mean, like we said earlier, this is almost just around the corner. We're looking at about a month and a half or so by the time this will go live. It's around the corner. A lot of people have been waiting, right? Some people were waiting to see what would happen with some of the events going on in Texas before they made a decision. Those decisions have been made, right? Or those events have passed.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. And they have ended on a positive note. So
Yes.
it's time. It's time. It's time to get those tickets. We still have plenty, and get them because, like Dennis said, this is a heck of a lineup, man. We got grand officers from Texas and from New Mexico and Arkansas and some of the most premier minds in the state talking. It's not me or Dennis. These are like upper echelon minds in our fraternity, and they're coming to share what they have learned with us.
Yes.
It's huge. I mean,
That's
I'm really pumped. So get those
that's
tickets. Go
something.
to Eventbrite.
Yeah, that's something I was going to tag on to what you were saying is that, and this is something different from everybody else. This
Yeah,
is not a deep esoteric talk like you're going to get at Masonicon. It's not a nuts and bolts how to run your lodge like you're going to get in at officer leadership training. This is actually leadership.
yep.
This is information and understanding that only top leaders are going to be able to provide. When you set a goal in your life and you want to learn something, if even if it's going to a book, who are you going to go to? You're going to go to the people who are the professors at Harvard to teach you about leadership, or are you going to read the books of the CEOs that are putting out books on how they got there and how they did their job and what was successful to them?
Absolutely.
This is what this is. This is a leadership conference for leaders in Texas and learning from leaders in Texas as well as our surrounding states and grand jurisdictions. And this is the one of a kind.
It's for leaders and brothers that want to be leaders.
Yes.
And speaking of leadership, the reason we are recording this evening is we are going to talk about the progressive line, which is something we touched on before, right? But it's been a long time.
Yes.
We should probably have this
It sure
conversation
has.
4 or 5 months ago, but better late than never, right, Dennis?
Yes. And there are pros and cons to it. And we're going to make sure and give a fair vantage point of both so that you can make up your mind on how you feel about it, because it's not all about what Justin and I feel.
Yeah.
We have strong opinions, but you need to ultimately decide for yourself how you feel about it so that you'll know how to approach it in your lodge.
Dennis, let's start with the basics on this. Why don't you explain to me what the progressive line is?
The progressive line is a series of steps. It's meant to be a series of steps within the leadership of your lodge. And it starts at the very beginning at the steward position and then works its way up. Now, a lot of people think that the marshal and which some lodges don't even have, which we may not even really touch on a whole lot, but a lot of people think that those are the lower end parts or the Tyler, whatever. I disagree. The very beginning spot is actually the steward's position, and then it works up from there. And what's supposed to happen is you're supposed to learn different lessons on what it takes to serve and to lead with servant leadership.
Mm-hmm.
If it's done properly, that's what happens. If it's done improperly, we all know the due course it takes.
Exactly. So on that note, the way that the progressive line usually progresses in most lodges is like Dennis said. So a new brother will start at a steward position, and every year he will advance up. So he'll go junior steward, senior steward, start junior deacon, senior deacon, and then junior warden, senior warden, and then worship master. The issue with this is that there's not necessarily any thought that goes into it, right? Once you enter the line, you start progressing every year. And keep in mind that I said it starts at the junior steward, but that's not always the case. Dennis probably seen something very similar, but I have also seen where a new brother goes directly into a warden position. And by new, I mean brand new to the fraternity. Right. And as soon as officer election rolls around, he's a master mason, he's a warden, and then the second year he's a worship master. I've seen this.
Yes.
So what is the issue that occurs with your typical progressive line, Dennis?
The issue that I see is that most people, once you become that junior steward, then it's automatically thought that you're just going to go through the line. It doesn't matter which I'm going to say all except for the top 3 are all appointed positions. So they could change every year and you don't necessarily need to go up that line. However, if tradition prevails, then what normally happens is that whether you do good or bad, people will usually just let you keep going and let you keep going. And they keep thinking, well, it's gonna be better next year. It's gonna be different. It's gonna be different. Well, by the time he gets to junior warden, he'll be more prepared. By the time he gets to worshipful master, he'll have a good grasp of how this lodge works, and he'll be prepared to be worshipful master. Now, personally, if it's just done based on if it's just done without merit, then there's a serious flaw in that. What do you think about that?
In regards to the merit, or just everything in general?
Well, in regards to the merit versus oh my goodness,
Versus just progressing.
Yes, just it's kind of like what is it with, and you may have to edit this out.
I think
Okay.
that the progressive line it serves a purpose, and it can be a positive thing if it is done intentionally, right? You mentioned the junior steward or steward positions in general, in the servitude that it teaches.
Yes,
that's
exactly what it's supposed to.
Because the best leaders are servant leaders. They're there to serve their lodge, correct? They still make decisions when they have to. They're not indecisive, but they're serving their lodge. I still remember going to an officer leadership training and going through the dinner line, and looking down at my plate, and I look up, and this Grand Master Brad Billings at the time, serving, I think it was beans, serving food to people as they came by. So those lessons of servant leadership,
with a big smile on his face.
A big smile on his face, yeah. Or never left him, and I think that's why he had such a successful year, because he had the servant heart, right? And so that's just one example. Every position in the lodge has a specific role associated with it, and the importance of each role is taught to you as you go through, right? Furthermore, it gives the brothers an opportunity to watch, because if you are a junior deacon and you never learn your work, or if you don't ever show up, or if you're just disagreeable, or I would even say if you, well, that won't be as important right now, but if it looks like there's beginning to be issues, you shouldn't necessarily progress, right? Especially when you start looking at senior deacon, because after senior deacon, you're going to go into the officer chairs. And this is where I was going to say earlier, if your mentality for what Freemasonry is, doesn't necessarily, it doesn't have, I'm not saying it has to match perfectly, because a little changes, a little difference of opinion can be a positive thing. But if we are an educational lodge and all you want to do is fundraising, then you probably shouldn't go through the chairs unless you either are willing to reevaluate that, because that goes against the grain of the culture we have at our lodge. But however, what most lodges will do, and I said this earlier on a Facebook post, is we are so afraid. We're so afraid of any kind of anything that would disrupt the peace and harmony, that we're not willing to make those decisions, and that's really what has led us to this entire conversation.
Well, and there's another thing as well. Servant leadership doesn't mean that you're going to be in the trenches all the time. Servant leadership just means that you are in it for the betterment of your lodge and your fraternity. It's not, it doesn't mean that you're going to be down there scrubbing the floors of the lodge before every meeting because nobody else will do it. It means that you know how to delegate, you know how, and and this is the thing. We learn to serve as a junior steward because that's our only goal, is to serve, just to do what we can. We not only serve our brothers, but we take their plates and throw them away. We clean up the trash. We clean up the lodge. We do everything that we can for the lodge. So we know what all needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
That way, when we move into the senior steward position, we can guide the next junior steward on what all needs to be done. As we go through these different progressions, we're learning what all needs to be done throughout the lodge. And it's not the junior steward's position to deal with the stuff upstairs in the lodge room, because that's your junior deacon and your senior deacon's positions. So you don't worry about that right now. So as you're going, you're learning all the things that must be done in the lodge to be successful. It doesn't mean that by the time you get up to worshipful master, or even into a position or two positions further, that it's your job to keep doing that and keep cleaning the toilets of the lodge. That means that you know it's somebody's position, and you know to encourage that person to do the best they can at their job, because one day they won't be doing that job anymore. They'll be doing something more important,
I think
or bigger, or not necessarily more important, but just different.
A great example, aside from the steward positions we're talking about, this is kind of a peeve of mine. Whenever the worship master wants to ask the senior deacon to introduce everybody, and the senior deacon is just, he's like, okay, everybody stand up and introduce yourselves, right? That's not best practice. That shows that you didn't really do your job, that you didn't really talk to anybody.
Right.
However, if you were a past senior deacon, right, in the past, and somebody taught you how to do it the right way, now you know what's to be expected. You know how it should be done, and you'll communicate that. And so the experience in each of those positions not only should show you the best way to do it, but also give you an idea of any pitfalls, any expectations, anything you need to communicate. Also, some lodges have unique cultures, like certain officers are always on certain committees and things like this. If you didn't go through it, say you just join a lodge and they throw you in the lineup, like you're a warden as soon as you join, or you become a master mason, you're a warden, right? Everyone's always telling you things, and you're overwhelmed because people are always talking at you. Anytime you try to do something, they're like, well, we can't do that because of this. This is how we do this. This is how it should be done, yada, yada, yada. And it's frustrating. You see them being overwhelmed, but if they had taken the time and gone through the line, I said if they had taken the time, it's really the lodge's fault for doing it to them, right? But if they had taken the time and went through it, they would have been much more prepared for it.
I'd like to, since we're still working on the positive of what the progressive line does for somebody, I'd like to share again what past Grand Master Brad Billings told me years ago. And this was back when I went to my first officer leadership training, which is something that Justin and I truly believe in, and should be started at senior deacon position at the very least. It can be done as Master Mason, but at the very least, the senior deacon's position, that should be the very first
the
year.
Lodge should start sending you a senior deacon position.
Yes.
Every Master Mason.
It should be an expectation.
Yes.
So anyways, at this officer leadership training, I was asking Brad, so what got you to where you are today? If somebody wanted to follow the path that you followed, what would get them to where you are today? And this was way before he was even elected to, but he had already done a lot of great things and worked with different lodges and different appendant bodies. He told me, you just do the small things well. You do that good, and then you'll get to take on something a little bigger. And each time you take on something a little bit bigger, until finally you get there. And that's the truth. And that's the positive in the progressive line. Its function is utilized properly within the lodge.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I mean, vacuuming a lodge room may seem like a small thing, right? But if you do it well, it makes a big difference. It makes an impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about what the progressive line is and how it usually operates and how it can be beneficial. Let's explore. We kind of hinted at this. Let's explore the unfortunate side of the progressive line, because it can be a very powerful and useful tool if done right. And I think we'll explore. I think what we'll do is let's look at the negative side, like we said, and then what I want to do is take a green grass, blue sky, like an ideal mentality, like everything's perfect. This is how your progressive line should run. So
Okay.
let's look at the negative, because it's important to understand, because a lot of people probably are experiencing this in their lodges, especially freshly now that most people have been installed at this point, or they will before August, and so installations are over. They're seeing this side, but they might not realize it's a negative thing. So go ahead and tell me your opinion. What are some of the negative parts of the progressive line?
The worst thing that we can do is give someone responsibility that they haven't earned, and it really fails the person as well, because with that responsibility you would expect a certain amount of respect. But if you haven't earned that position with the work that you've done with the previous position, or past previous positions, then you're not going to have the respect nor the knowledge to be able to perform that duty well. That's probably the biggest downfall of the progressive line, by just pushing people through that have not shown proficiency in their preceding place or station, and efficiency, and proficiency means to be a pro, right? To be very fluid in what you're doing. So if you're not able to show proficiency in your previous station or place, what gives you the right to go forward? And why is this lodge pushing people forward?
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest negative, because like I said, number one, you aren't prepared to do it because you don't understand how to do it. And number two, you don't have the respect of your peers, and then you get everybody coming from you at every direction telling you what to do, because you don't have that respect from them to be able to do it and handle it on your own and make decisions for yourself.
I would say also, to add on to that, and I agree wholeheartedly, is that we touched on this earlier with the progressive line. It's almost autonomous in many lodges. You're appointed to whatever position, and the next year, if you kept showing up, you'll go to the next position, regardless of if you did anything associated with that position or not. The one of the biggest issues, aside what you talked about, is for some reason we think that every Mason is a good leader, right? Now we encourage them to be leaders in their communities and things like that, but running a city council meeting, or being a leader at your job, or the Lions Club, or anything like that, it's a completely different beast than running a Masonic lodge. And I would know I'm active in a lot of different things. The agenda may look similar, but it's completely different. And if you keep advancing through the line, and if a lodge keeps advancing people without any indication of any kind of leadership capabilities whatsoever, then by the time they get to the east, you have somebody that's gone through the chairs, but they have no ability, they have no leadership skills whatsoever. And in fact, on the more dramatic end of the spectrum, I have personally seen, I don't know, many people, I know Dennis probably has, and many people watching this have personally seen people with not just bad leadership traits, but toxic traits that have gone through the line and ended up in leadership positions sitting in the East at the lodge. The biggest issue with this, right? Like we avoid keeping people out of the line. We avoid not advancing people, if that makes sense, out of fear of disrupting peace and harmony. However, in doing so, we put people in positions of leadership that create entire years of chaos and disharmony. And I have personally seen it.
This is true. You can actually kill a lodge. You can absolutely kill a lodge in 1 year. You can work to build up a lodge and build up a culture and an attitude of prosperity. Even though you're not there yet, you've built up this culture to do good and do well. And then one worshipful master can come in and tear it all down and say, no, I didn't believe in all this stuff, so we're going to do it my way. And then it kills the lodge. Not only does it kill the lodge in the fact that you've lost all faith in the culture that you created, but it kills the lodge because it kills morale.
Yep.
Because that one person is saying they know better than the lodge. And the lodge makes decisions based on the lodges make decisions based on the lodge's best interest. Mm-hmm. So as you're going through the line and they're building you up for this position, and then you come in as one person and tear it all down, you're saying that all of their ideas and values are worthless, and that you know better than all of them. That's about as arrogant and pathetic as a person can be.
Well, that's why it's so important that they share the vision. I guess that's a better way of putting it than I did earlier. Every lodge should have a vision, right? They should have a mission. By the time you're a senior deacon, if it's apparent that he does not share your vision or your mission, that's problematic, like you're talking about.
Right. Well, in fact, I tell people that are going into the junior warden seat the first time they're elected in, I tell them that that's the point that you start recognizing the people in your lodge, the culture of the people, and understanding who your shakers and movers are, who does this, who does that. And that way you can help keep that culture going as you progress through the lines. You can, feed what their love is in Freemasonry and keep the best out of everybody working within the lodge, because that keeps the culture going. It keeps the culture moving the way that it wants to move. Yep. And that's can't say enough about that.
Give me the healthiest and most prosperous lodge and put a bad leader in the East, and you will see negative changes almost immediately. It does. Yes. I mean, it happens. It happens. You could even say it happens at levels higher than the lodge level. I've seen that before. You have a really good year, and then things happen. So it's very important to be intentional and mindful about who you're putting in leadership positions. So let's talk about ideal situations then. What would you say is the ideal lodge, right? Number 100, and it has an intentional progressive line, policy, practice, whatever you want to call it, in place. What do you think that would look
like? The dream lodge. Well, it starts at the very beginning, and when that worshipful master goes to each of the appointed officers, number one, well, we should go back a little bit, because actually, if you do it like the Grand Lodge does it, which is the way that we're supposed to do it, because your junior warden is supposed to pick your stewards, and your senior warden is supposed to choose your deacons, if I remember right. And then, anyways, but when those appointed positions are being appointed, the very first thing that we should do is explain that our progressive line is based on the successes of the person that's in front of us. So our job is to help that person to have a great year, and to do our job and then help that person have a great year and prepare for yourself to be in that position as well. And in doing that, you're setting up a mentality that I'm going to be there next, and I want to make it better for myself to sit in that seat. And if you do that, then everybody's helping each other along the way. And then ultimately, once you get up there, then you're ready to go. The the other thought that I was having with that before I went on that stupid tangent is when you express that culture, you also let the person know, look, there's no guarantees here. Those last three, they're elected positions. If you're not showing that you're prepared for that position, then the lodge will vote to keep you down, to keep you out. Your senior deacon position may be the last position you hold in that lodge until you learn that position. Or, they may tell you to hold over for a year. If they're nice about it, they'll ask you to hold over. If not, they'll say, go back to the end of the line. We have too many people coming up that are showing too much progress. I think that in an ideal lodge, that's the very first step, is having that discussion with the first person as they come in, that very first person that's going to be junior steward, let's say, because you already had that talk with all the others.
I would say, since we're talking about like the first step, which I like that approach. So let's say looking at the first step. So we're looking at the stewards and possibly the deacons at this point, right? I like what you said. I don't know that it's codified anywhere, like at the lodge level, but I always felt like it made sense. Like the junior warden is kind of over the stewards, and the senior warden's over the deacons, right? I think so. In this ideal lodge, right, a new brother starts as a steward every time, and he is given clear expectations from the day he's installed. Clear expectations. These are the things that you need to do before every meeting, before every degree, before you leave, before everybody gets here. And the junior warden is responsible for being sure that he's doing that, right? And if he does, then possibly he can progress the next year. Same thing with the deacons. They're given clear, concise, straightforward directions. Do these things, and if you do them well, then
maybe have a list.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like a list.
Why not have a binder for your lodge that has all that stuff?
I agree.
I was thinking just on the lines that you were saying.
And at a higher level, looking at the wardens themselves, that's when the entire lodge is looking. I mean, the entire lodge should be looking at all the positions, but this is when it rubber really hits the road. And I would even say, starting with the senior deacon, the entire lodge needs to be looking very intently at this guy. To see if he is ready to advance. So I think that's great as a first step. I would say the second step is when we start looking at the actual elected positions, specifically the big three, right? The wardens and the worship master. And I think this is when the rubber really hits the road. Right. And I want to preface all this by saying I think one of the worst practices, not just in Texas, but I know this is across many other Grand Lodges, is this idea that your years in services are one and done, right? You spend a year in the East, and regardless of how good it was, it could be the most prosperous year the lodge has ever seen. When your year is over, thanks here's a past master certificate, and go sit down somewhere. I think if
Go
you
sit in the
have
Tyler seat.
go sit in the Tyler seat, I think if you have leadership that is capable and doing a good job and willing to remain in their seat, the lodge should vote to keep them in their seat. And this has drastic consequences for every position, because not only does that mean you have more time to learn your role, but it also means, say, I am a junior deacon and I am just not cutting the what's the whatever.
Mustard.
I'm not cutting the mustard. That's what I was looking for. I'm not cutting the mustard. That first year, it's over, and the senior warden pulls me aside and says, "I'm going to recommend someone else be appointed." What that means is, well, the stewards move up, right? And someone probably takes the junior steward position. So that means not only are you not advancing, you're going to be waiting. You might be waiting a while to get back in that line, because I think it starts right back at the beginning. Right. And you might be waiting a while because there's probably already a waiting list and they're not moving quickly, right? But any business, any corporation that changes, and I'm looking at the Grand Lodge level too, that changes its leadership every year is a terrifying idea. It's terrifying. How would you want to work for a new boss every year? Would you want to invest?
I would not
in
invest
company?
in those stocks.
I would not. I would not, especially if they're just putting people in arbitrarily, like a lot of lodges do.
Right.
So,
it's almost like investing in Chinese stocks, right? Because they pad those people in there. They throw those people in there overnight, but if they piss them off, they'll take them out of there overnight too. So you never know where those stocks are really going to be.
Oh man.
But we don't need to go into that.
Yeah, I would even say, like the lodge says, again, the lodge is setting expectations and those are formalized, right? I would probably even, I don't know if I'd include in the rules and regulations or anything, but I would definitely have a binder. And I would say, once you're senior deacon, you are expected to go to officer leadership training.
Right. I would say put it in your rules and regulations. If that's the expectation of the lodge, because that can also, once the expectation is no longer there, you can take it out of the rules and regulations.
Yeah.
But as long as it's there, put it in there, and that way it has to be done before they're allowed to go into junior warden.
Mm-hmm. Senior deacon should know his work. He should know how to introduce people, right? Basic stuff, honestly. But he, first and foremost, he should be sure that he is going to officer leadership training. And he should be sure that he knows how to do the junior warden's position before he's advanced.
He has to know he has the time to do that stuff, because if he doesn't have the time to do that stuff, then why is he wasting everybody else's time?
Yeah, and if these guys aren't showing up, I would say 3/4 of all meetings, why are you advancing them? Why are you advancing them? Now, if it's like a legitimate reason, like career or something like that, I would revisit that. But if they're just not showing up, no expectation, they got a different excuse every time. You don't want them in leadership positions. You don't want the marshal master that doesn't show up just because he didn't feel like it that day.
Well, even if it's a career situation, maybe right now it's not the right time for them to be in that position. You know, I live an hour and a half from San Antonio Scottish Rite. I'm on the education committee, and I travel up there 4 or 5 times a month with all the different things that I'm involved in with the Scottish Rite, Knights of St. Andrew, all that. If I wasn't willing to do that, I should have never said yes to those positions and those points of leadership. That's another thing that we forget about, is what our availability is. And if we aren't available, we're just not available. If we're not willing to make ourselves available, then we shouldn't take on those positions, because it's hurting everybody, not just us.
Yep. So yeah, do you have anything you want to add to what we were just talking about? Like the second?
I would like to, because before we go back to the one and done year, I'd like to say I do believe in multiple year terms.
Mm-hmm.
I do think though that it shouldn't be unlimited, but I think that it should be at least 2 years. maybe 3, but I wouldn't go a whole lot further than that. And the reason why is because you can also get stagnant in what you're doing.
Yep.
So, and then I'll wrap it up with my thought on the 1-year terms. So if you have the 2 years, then you do have your chance to get your feet wet in that new position and learn it well. And then the next year, you're really gonna take off with that position.
Mm-hmm.
And not that you weren't already prepared, but you're really not prepared until you're there. Really, it's just like that old saying: when you sit down in the seat at Worshipful Master, all the ritual just falls right out your tail end. It just falls out of the seat, right?
Yeah.
Well, kind of let your hiccups get through that first year, and then the next year you really have a good year. And if it's really good after that, and you don't really have anybody to fill in to the junior steward position, take it another year. Take it 3 years. That's fine. But really, if you don't have people coming in the door within that time frame to be able to fill that junior steward position, then that's a problem in itself. And then your lodge is not being effective with what they're doing. Yep. So in that time frame, you're basically giving yourself the time to have somebody fill that next position in the line. So if you're not making one Mason every 3 years, you need to shut your doors and go somewhere else. I'm sorry.
I think if we look at a big picture, if we look at Ideal Lodge, right, this fictional lodge that I made up, if we were looking at the big picture, it takes a while. Everything takes a while. I mean, if we're talking about ideal situation, from the time this guy walks in the door and wants to join, it takes a while to get a petition, right? It takes a while to get all of his degrees because we're intentional. We're teaching him stuff aside the catechism. And then it takes a while to get into the line and then progress through that line, assuming they even have leadership potential. They may be happy. Right. They may be more interested in learning lectures. They may be more interested in education or giving presentations, right? Or conferring degrees. They may not want to go through the line.
Some people are great at degree teams.
Yeah, and we should drop this assumption that every Mason has to go through the line. And furthermore, we should also drop the assumption that just because it's time for elections doesn't mean we have to change. We have to elect everybody to be new.
Right. And I would say we have to get rid of that mentality that once they get into the top 3, that it's a done deal. Because that's a specific reason why those 3 positions were and are still elected positions. Because by the time you get there, if you don't know your stuff, you should not be elected to junior warden. If you can't perform junior warden very well, you better not be going to senior warden. And then, of course, senior warden, if you don't know it by then you have no business. And that's failure of the lodge.
Yeah.
If that's the case.
Yeah. Very good. Well,
but a lot of times what we do is just real quick. A lot of times what we do is we just, because it's taken them so long to get there, you feel bad and you don't want to just cut them. So that's when, if your lodge has a bleeding heart like that, and you don't want to knock somebody out because they've been doing bad, then you may need to go to that 2-year system to give them a chance. But after that time,
I think we need to stop being emotional and be more logical.
Right.
Like there are, so I'll just leave it at that. We need to stop being emotional and feeling things, right? And we need to be logical. And we need to be logical about what's best for our lodge and logical about following through with it.
Well, and I'd like to also point out, because I told you I wanted to run into this after the 2-year thing. Even in the 1 year, the 2-year creates a shared vision with everybody. Even with the 1 year, everyone should have a shared vision. You can have the perfect lodge having 1-year terms, but everyone has to have the same vision that you're not going to change everything when you go to the east. You're going to build upon what's already there. So you're going to keep what's there unless it really sucks, and then you get rid of it. But it has to be a consensus. It's not just your decision, but build upon what your predecessors have done. And if the top three aren't planning each year together, you'll never have that consensus. You'll never have that attitude of building upon each other.
Good point. All right. Well, do you have any final thoughts? Because I feel like we covered it very thoroughly.
I think that what we ought to do at some point is create a list, like we were talking about, with what each position should do, and maybe create a informational video on that, mm-hmm. to just highlight, what the ideal situation is, and if each person covers these things, then everything in the lodge gets covered.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's something I'd like to work on with you and get that put out. And with that being said, all of you brothers out there, we just created a informational video on how to become a Freemason, and it's and you ought to go look at it and see that you agree. Everyone that I've had people coming out of the woodworks telling me how great a video that is. And I've told every one of them that video is available for you to embed into your own lodge website and on Facebook. And we've had several people that have done that already. Mm-hmm. Simply for if people want to join, then it's just an informational. It's not Justin and I talking. We wrote it all up, but we had a voiceover created so that it wouldn't be us, promoting our own thoughts, except for the informational on what we believe of the steps on what it takes to become a Freemason. So feel free to take that and use it on your website, as long as you're a legitimate Masonic organization.
Good point. I'd like to add that the reason we created this is so many lodges are doing the assembly line approach with this progressive line, right? I mean, sometimes they're throwing people right in the middle of it. There's a reason it exists. However, if you are mindless about it, meaning you're not intentional, it does more harm than good, because you're putting bad materials on the assembly line, and the product is not going to be what you're looking for. And so you have to be willing to one, take more time with your officers. Like Dennis said, at least 2 years. Let them sit. Let the elected officers at least sit for 2 years, and frankly, let this line build up. Right? There's no reason. There's no advantage to having a new lineup every single year. Most lodges, 90% of people are all past masters. If everybody's a past master, it loses its value, right? The title means less because it is more common. So slow down and be intentional with your leadership and your progressive line. And this will ensure that the best leaders are going into the warden positions and into the worship master positions. These are people that have gone through like all the officer leadership training. They're engaged, however the lodge wants to be engaged, and they are sharing the same vision, and that will set you up for success, as opposed to people with different ideas about how things should be done, keeping their ideas to themselves until it's their turn in the East, and then launching all these ideas as though it's just spontaneously came to them. So definitely be intentional. And I know this ideal lodge we talked about, it's a lot of work. I think as far as like the ideal things we talk about, Dennis, I think it's probably the most reasonable, the most rational, the easiest to implement. It's just start taking your time and develop a program that tells everybody what they're supposed to do and actually expect them to follow through. I don't think that's crazy or anything like that. That said, I also want to just remind everybody, we talked about this at the beginning. I want to end on this note also. If you enjoy this kind of content, right? If you want to learn more about leadership, not just if you are a leader, but if you want to become a leader, not just in Freemasonry, but a leader, then the Masonic Improvement Summit is where you need to be, September 16th, right? It's focusing on Freemason leadership, but it will grow you in all aspects if you grow as a leader. Be there.
Yes.
Check the link on the bottom. It's Eventbrite. Get your tickets. Come to Corpus. You will not regret it. It will be one of the highlights of your Masonic year. That said,
And not only are you learning from leaders, but you're going to be meeting a lot of other leaders that are like-minded, and it helps you build up your circle around you so that you can be a more effective leader.
absolutely.
Leaders have their circles of friends.
Yep.
There's no way that Warren Buffett or any of the other biggest leaders in the world got there without their circle of friends that were all like-minded and helped each other get there.
Iron sharpens iron, right?
Yes.
Well, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.